So hello everyone, welcome to today's presentation on the GISP. My name is Leticia Vasquez. I'm one of the co-chairs of the Professional Development Committee at the New York State GIS Association, and I'm gonna let my counterpart and colleague introduce herself.
Hey, I'm Melissa Albino Hegeman, and I am also one of the co-chairs of the Professional Development Committee here, and I'm glad to see everybody signing on for today's event.
All right, so next announcement. So if you're currently not a member of the New York State GIS Association, we encourage you to join so that you can not only participate in webinars and opportunities such as this, but also, you get newsletters and, see different things that are happening in the GIS realm. And it's pretty cool. So I encourage you all to, if you're not a member, to become a member. And then lastly, if you have any questions or would like to partner with us with the Professional Development Committee, please reach out to us. This is our email. I will also be putting it in the chat. So if you have any questions, concerns, comments, feedback, we welcome it all. And with that being said, I will stop sharing my screen and I will pass it on to Chris, who will be sharing on today, providing us all with the information session on GIS. And so just very quickly, Chris Badurek, Dr. Chris Badurek, has a PhD and is a GISP and is currently the president of the New York State GIS Association and is an associate professor of geography at the State University of New York at Cortland. Has been a GISP since 2011 and has presented on the GIS application and renewal processes for professionals and educators. He also previously served on the GISP Exam Development Committee for 5 years and is currently on the GISP Outreach Committee for the GIS Certification Institute, the GISCI, which is the organization that manages the GISP credentials. So thank you, Chris, for joining us today. So yeah.
Right. Welcome, everyone. Thanks, Leticia, for that great introduction and all the great information you're sharing. I'm so thrilled, and everyone on the New York State GIS Association board is so thrilled with the very cool and informative webinars that we've been having over the last few months. And just great job, and thanks so much. And thanks to everyone participating today. So I'm going to provide an update about the GISP Professional Certification Credential. And my thought process is that I'll tell you a little bit about the background of it. And I think that might be helpful to kind of see where the GISP certification is coming from and what its intentions are. And that sort of informs about the exam process and the methods that are used to accomplish the goals of professional certification. So I would just like to say that this information has been shared by Bill Hodge, who is the interim executive director. He's been the executive director for a long time, and he is sort of the king of GISP. Perhaps several of you have seen him. He's sort of also the king of like LinkedIn, right? So it's a great place, right? So Bill has provided some of this content, and I will begin sharing it now. Okay, so. All right, so GISP update. So This is sort of interesting, right? So GISP has really been around since 2003. It's pretty surprising, right? So it's been an 18-year process. And probably the most significant development that's happened over that time is that we've now gotten to this certification exam, right? So the certification exam for GISPs is called the GISCI Core Technical Knowledge Exam, right? And that sounds like a mouthful, but it's really meant to be an overview of the core elements of what GISers should know after they've been working for 4 years, right? And so before I dive in a little bit further, I think we're going to share a poll question or a series of poll questions here to get a sense of where people are coming from. All right, looks like our first poll is what job sector industry are you in? And we'll check that out. So this is going to be great. So I'll match up what we have here with the actual statistics of GISPs in New York. So this will be interesting. All right. Okay, government, education, nonprofit, other. All right, so obviously the commercial sector is a huge component of the GISP world, and I'll be talking about that in a second. All right, looks good. So here's our results. Looks like we have a good mix. That is pretty typical of what we'll see, 60-40. So 60% commercial, I would venture to guess, with 40% government and then 10% education, and then some nonprofit, of course. Maybe we can go on to the next one. All right, where are we in New York? Right, so I'll share a map with us that shows the lay of the land of GISPs in New York and where they're located, and it'll be interesting to see how well this group matches up today with the overall group. And it's pretty like evenly distributed across the state, right? As you may or may not guess. And this is looking about what pretty close to what I expected. Yeah, very good, very good. All right, that looks great. All right, New York, of course, #1, right? So I don't want to spoil a surprise, but obviously you can guess New York has the greatest number of GISPs, right? Maybe this will be on the geo trivia question in the future, right? It's sort of a no-brainer though. Leticia, do we have one more question? Yeah, so I think the other question we were looking at, how long have you been working, right? So how long have you been working in the field? So GISP is really about 4 years of work experience. And I'll have more to say about that, about your years of work experience and what you've been doing and how that relates to the questions on the exam. So it looks like we have a pretty solid tier of GIS pros here. That's great. Looks good. All right, I think we have one last one, maybe one last question. Oh, okay. So the last question. So we'll see if anyone is thinking about doing the GISP, or if anyone is on today that is a GISP, that's great. Welcome your comments and feedback, and maybe you can share your experiences. And then another aspect of this is educators. So if anyone's in the academia or education, having some sense of what's going on helps to inform students about what to expect when they go out into the workforce and they're trying to make their way. All right, so people are considering it, right? So this is great, awesome. All right, we got some GISPs on. Hey, that's great. All right. Well, let's move on then. Thanks everybody for sharing. That's pretty helpful. All right. Okay, so I think I can close this. All right, so now I will move into our facts here. Okay, so I thought this was interesting, right? So once you become a GISP, most of your information, well, by your choice, most of the time people put their information up on the public, and a GISP is registered on the GISCI website with information about your workplace and the address of your workplace, so we can look at this. And it's been a number of like papers and presentations people have been doing about the distribution of the GIS workforce. So I took a look at what we have here in New York State, right? So this is as of like November 1st, 2020, just a few months ago. And in New York State, we have 216 GISPs, which doesn't sound like that much, but it's actually pretty substantial. It's 2.1% of all the GISPs that are credentialed, right? So that's pretty good. So GISP is not only in the US, but it's actually international, right? So there's a large number in Canada and people all across the US, particularly in the people that do GIS in the Middle East, for example. That's a popular area. So what are the general sectors of what people, what New York GIS folks are doing, right? So you can see that similar to the poll that we just had, we have 45% are in the commercial sector. I'm sorry, are in government, and then we have 37% in the commercial sector, 11% that have not shared their workplace, and then 6% in academia. Then there's a smattering of nonprofits. These nonprofits are like land trust organizations or conservation organizations, generally these types of folks. And we have one retired person, so that's great. So if I wanted to blow this up, so I was also interested in this, that you can break up the government sector into smaller chunks, right? So no surprise that the kind of like broad government, city government is New York City government, has the most GISPs across the state, as you might imagine. And there's a number of different reasons for that I might get into. But you can see that there's a smattering of state, county. So we have state is also popular in the Albany area. We have folks from there. County government, of course, and even some of the smaller towns are involved with this, right? And in fact, we have tribal GIS members also, which is pretty cool, right? So that sort of gives us the sector breakdown, and then I created this this web app that I will share with you right now. If I can do that, put this in the chat. If anyone wants to play with this while I'm talking, you're certainly welcome. That what is the spatial distribution of GISers across New York that have GISPs? And this is obviously a screen capture, but you can see that the greatest concentration tends to be in the New York City area, directly for New York City government, and it also includes regional transportation organizations and regional governance. I put it into that category. We also have obviously the capital region is huge. You can see the Hudson Valley, and then we have the major cities that are in upstate, right? So Buffalo, Western New York area is a pretty significant proportion of the New York State GIS Association, as well as Rochester to after that, and then Syracuse, Ithaca kind of area. And then my friend Eileen Allen is all the way up here on the Canadian border. So shout out to her. So that gives us the distribution, right? So I think this is a indicator of why would someone want to become a GISP and go through this process, right? So I always feel like the GISP credential is most appealing to people that you might have your job currently, but you might want to use this as currency to move into another position or to get a management position. And generally when there's other GIS jobs around, that's when that currency is going to be at its greatest, right? So no surprise that Albany and New York City and Long Island area have the most GIS jobs per capita, and so its currency is the greatest, right? So of course these other areas also have value as well, and I'll talk about that as we go. Okay, so real quick, I wanted to talk a little bit about these different areas: certification, the numbers, where we are, what the process is, and then finally about the exam itself. So this is an interesting question, right? So why do people become GISPs in the first place, right? So why do we have certification? And I'll share a brief anecdote that I often share with my students. And if you're an educator, you can think about this as well. And if you graduated not that long ago, you can also relate to this. I often say to my students in my class, if you took my GIS class and you did all the labs and you handed in all your homework and you got an A, does that mean that you know how to do GIS? Right? And I guess it's bad for me to say no, right? So there's a problem here about standardizing technical knowledge and experience in a way that is sort of missing from academic credentials, right? So you can list all your classes that you've taken, but that doesn't necessarily translate into evidence of technical skill and ability, right? So the GISP is meant to standardize what we can expect from GIS professionals in the workforce. So the GISP certification is actually based on other types of certification processes that exist currently. And the main idea here is that certification is sort of the capstone of acceptance of a certain field as being a valid occupation that has its own knowledge, skills, and abilities, right? So professional certification happens in a number of different arenas, and GIS is just one of these, probably the most recent one. So students and people often have questions about the difference between certification and licensure. And obviously they differ, right? So if you want to be a PLS land surveyor, that's a licensing process, which is slightly different than a certification, right? Certification is a third party evaluates your credentials, and then you can articulate that to employers that you have these skills, right? So one thing that's interesting about this is that in 2016, which is still 5 years ago, almost 20% of people who are working in the workforce have some form of credential or license. And as an educator, I know that that's increasing over time, right? So we start to see this increasing emphasis in third-party certification. And it's happening in a lot of fields. And of course, it's happening in the GIS field as well, right? So it's part of a trend that we need to be aware of. Now, there's other certifications that exist out there. I'm not going to go through all of them, but a good comparison would be the Esri technical certification. So this is a process by which you are measured on your knowledge of Esri software. You can go through different stages and different levels of certification. The difference with the GIS CI, the GISP certification, is that it is geared to be software neutral, right? There's nothing in there about one particular software. And it's also meant to be discipline or work neutral, right? So if you can imagine trying to create a test that's software neutral and also is like relevant to every single field out there that might use GIS, ranging from a crime analyst to a land surveyor to people that are doing property records, it's pretty broad perspective. So, so I think I described that, right? So software is software neutral. Okay, so who oversees this? So the GIS Certification Institute is sort of an organization that's relatively small, and they sort of administer this process of taking the exam and becoming certified, but it takes input from other organizations, right? So they provide feedback. The GIS Certification Institute also receives feedback directly from employers, right? So they invite employers to either share through work surveys or directly with members. And that information is used to create the structure of how the GISP process works, right? It's directly tied to what the employers provide. And sort of interesting, academia doesn't really provide much into this, right? It's really, well, they do provide some, but a lot of it is directly tied to employers and the type of employers that share this information. So that's an important point. So these are some examples of the different organizations, if you're familiar with any of these. So we have some academic ones, UCGIS and AAG, sort of like the geography associations. And then there's these others, ERISA, GITA, NYSGIC, right? They provide input to the knowledge, skills, and abilities that we should be aware of. So GISCI also has these other partners. US Geospatial Intelligence Foundation, which is more of federal, and of course USGS. And the Geotech Center is an organization primarily for community college type education offerings. So we also get their input. Okay, so I did want to just stop before I forget that you know, why is that important that employers provide that information? It's because of the fact that if you're thinking about taking the exam, you have to think about there's all these jobs out there that exist, and GISCI has to find the common core for the full range of jobs, right? So a common mistake that folks make when they apply for a GISP process, particularly for the exam, is they think about the work that they do, right? So maybe I've been working for 10 years, but I do a relatively narrow set of tasks, right? So you're an expert on those tasks, but there's all these other tasks that you have to be aware of that you may or may not do at all or ever do. And yet you still have to know about that content, if that makes sense, right? So good example would be database management content, right? So perhaps you're not a DBA, you're not doing anything with that, but some of that content is still on the exam. Okay, so just real quick, so over a 15-year period, 8,000 people became GISPs, and then just in the last 5 years, 11,000 people became GISPs, right? So it's really starting to kind of take off within the last few years. And I've been involved with this exam development for I think 5 years or so. And at the time, people were concerned that if we put in an exam, people are going to not want to take go through the process, right? They're just going to, yeah, this is too hard, right? But in fact, the opposite has occurred, right? More people are more interested. And I find that to be pretty interesting, right? We thought that people would shy away, but I think it's because there's a tangible thing that you have to do to get your certification, right? You pass the exam. It makes sense, right? It makes intuitive sense. And there's value in that you accomplish. Okay, so the value of the number of professionals is increasing, and I didn't really go and show the whole distribution, but obviously there's certain areas of the United States where this is increasing more so than others, right? So the DC area, Los Angeles, Florida, right? There's real strongholds of GISPs that are related to the extent of the GIS industry. Okay, so what types of people get GISPs, right? And I just showed us the stats that the majority are people who work in the commercial sector. You either work for a GIS company, broadly defined, or a GIS consulting company, So that's the majority. And then close behind is government, right? So all levels of government is after that. And then there's just a smattering of academics after that. So this is sort of interesting to give you an example, right? So these are so ACOM is the company that has the greatest number of GISPs, over 160. And then after that, y'all can see that this is the big names in the GIS consulting world: Baker, Stantec, Dewberry, Wolpert, CDM. All these companies, they tend to value the value of the GISP tends to be greatest in the commercial sector, in the sense that it probably, well, this is my supposition, that it enables people to get ahead more easily. And in government, there's slightly different processes, though it's still valuable for that in particular, right? So those are the leading companies. So now I want to switch over to how do we do it, right? So what's the process? Okay, so if you've looked into it, and it sounds like a number of people have looked into the details, you probably know that you can go to the GISCI website, and it has all the information on it. And these are the basic processes, right? So the first thing is there's a code of ethics for GIS professionals that it's well written. It actually has some interesting content in it. And then we submit a portfolio. So, what is a portfolio? Interesting question, right? So a portfolio is simply a record that backs up what you say in your application, right? So if I say that I have 4 years of work experience, right, how am I going to provide evidence of this, right? So you fill out the application form, and it has detailed information about it, about the types of tasks that you do, right? So if you're doing really sort of I would call it higher order tasks, perhaps like managing a spatial database for an organization, right? You'll meet your work experience points really quickly, perhaps more so than more basic tasks like data entry or something like that, which seems pretty intuitive, right? So you detail your education, right? And that can really vary, right? If you have an associate's degree, sometimes you can meet the criteria just with that itself. Experience, and then contributions to the profession, right? So contributions to the profession are, as Leticia was saying earlier, being a member of our association and joining a committee. All those things are contributions, and those are expected, that you're going to be an active member of a community, right? So so you fill out the form and you get points, and then you meet the minimum criteria for the points, and then you're eligible for the process, right? So workshops like this count as education points. So if you wanted to add this into your GISP exam, that's totally fine. All you have to do is make a record of it. So the portfolio is often something as simple as your registration, right? So if you could use this 1 hour as a professional development point, you can simply keep a record of your registration, and you include that in this bundle of stuff that you submit and upload to GISCI. All right, so it's evidence that you did it, right? Okay, so the last part is taking the exam, right? So once you met the work experience, we have to take the exam. All right, so I think I talked about that. Okay, so the cost is, there's a little bit of cost involved, right? So there's an application fee to get the ball rolling. Somebody's got to review your portfolio. That's another fee. And then we have the exam fee, and that's $250. And so you really want to put effort into your taking the preparation to take the exam. And I will tell you that right now it's not an easy exam, and the pass rate is about 60% or less, right? And you may say, well, that sounds low, right? How hard is this, right? And the number one reason that people don't pass the exam is because they don't prepare for it. They just go in and they take it, right? And this, hey, I've been working for 10 years. I don't need to study. I'm just going to go in and take this, and and if I don't pass, then I don't pass, right? And guess what happens? They don't pass. Right? So preparation is the number one reason. So the more you prepare, the more likely it is that people will fail. So I think that numbers kind of scares people sometimes, that the 60% success. You have to bear in mind that I would say 20-25% of people don't study at all before they take the exam, and that's sort of the end result. Yeah, so and then there's an annual maintenance fee, right? So you become part of a professional group, and so there's this expectation that we're going to pay a fee to maintain your certification. Okay, so that's good for 3 years, and then you have to recertify every 3 years, right? So I just did mine not too long ago. It's about $95 a year, which I think is a reasonable cost for a professional organization. There's others out there that are more costly, but you can also do it as one payment, right? So it basically goes every 3 years. All right, so what's on the exam? So the exam was they started this process way back in 2012, and the idea is that there is this process by which GISCI talked with all these employers. They gathered all this information about the types of work that people should be able to do, and then they converted it into this listing of tasks, right? And it's called a blueprint. And so, when they ask employers, they ask them, well, what do you think people should be able to do with 4 years of GIS experience, right? And the answer is there's a range from different levels of technical experience, and it also varies according to the type of work that people do, right? So if you work doing geodesy for the federal government, looking at like satellites, versus people that are working on land parcel records, or you're doing transportation planning, all these things vary, right? And so from that they distilled the core task from all these different things that people do. And it's not an easy process, and I actually was part of this process. And the idea is really to make it easier for you to understand the types of things that might appear to be on the exam. So the exam is given twice a year, right? So it's in June and in December, and it's usually the first week, week of June, and then the first week of December. So the current period is now open. It's June 5th through 12th, right? So that's the June 5th through June 12th. You can go ahead and register. There's a process. You can sign up and make an appointment, and you can take the exam. Okay, so I'm not going to run through all of this because this is probably too much, but one thing I did want to get to was this, and you would have seen this on the exam if you're considering taking it. These are the KSAs and the type of material that's on the exam. And so it's also matched to the relative proportion of questions that would be on the exam, right? So you can see the different areas that are included. Probably the area that has the most is the data fundamentals, right? So there's a lot of questions about data management, and data management applied to work practice, right? So most of the questions are applied to written in a way that gets at how you would do certain things at your job, right? So a lot of the questions are applied practice questions. And I always find that my students are dismayed that only 10% is on cartography. We love making maps, right? Everybody loves making maps. But you know what's interesting? Employers, they don't love maps, right? Employers want people to do the brute force data management stuff that's required to fill up databases that meet the requirements for their clients, right? So it's very, very data centric perspective here, right? And you know, I can't really dive into the exact details of that, but if you think about the data and data management as being the core element of practice, then you'll be in good shape. All right, I think you all can read through some of these. I'm going to skip to the end here. So how to prepare, right? So I can't stress enough the fact that preparation is really a key element to passing the exam. So the GISCI has done a number of surveys of people that have taken the exam and matched up generally how much did they study and what their success was. And basically, the more people prepare, the more likely you are to be successful, right? So to help people, GISCI created this official practice exam, and the URL is below there. It's on the website as well. You can take a practice exam for a relatively low fee. It's available now, so you can just try it out, right? You can test yourself, right? So it's a good way to sort of assess the areas that you're strong in and other areas that you might need to like go back and brush up on. And so self-assessment is really sort of an important part of that. Now, there's websites out there that have information about this that you can go and take a look at that are not from GISCI. People share their experiences online, and you can check that out. Okay, so I just talked about the practice exam. It's $30, and I think it's well worth the cost. You know, if you're paying $300 to take the test, $30 is a good way to see what you're going to do, right? All right, so I'm just going to wrap it up here, and then we'll open it up for conversation, I hope. Okay, so what does the future hold, right? So you know, I'm interested in this question also. If people want to share their thoughts, as part of the New York State GIS Association, and I'm also part of the GISCI outreach committee about getting greater interest in GIS certification. And you know, I hope that people find it valuable, right? We want it to be valuable. That you know, it's worth. No, the cost is one thing, but it's your personal time, right? So we want people to get something out of the time that you spend that's going to help you with your career. And one of the ways that we can do that is to kind of promote the GISP with employers, right? So if employers value it, then it makes greater emphasis on its value for the workplace. Okay, the other thing is, so there's the other thing with the GISCI that is probably worth mentioning here is that there's going to be an increased convergence, I would say, between the surveying world and the GIS world. So people that are involved in engineering or transportation planning or in land records or county government, this has been, people have been talking about this for a long time, right? So there's government issues that have to do with how that's all going to fit together, right? So I just mentioned that PLS is a license and GIS is a certification, but eventually these are going to start to get closer and closer together, and how that works out, it will be interesting, right? Okay, so I think that's all I wanted to say about that. And just wanted to thank everybody for your time and for listening. And looks like we have some questions in the chat. And
Ooh.
I put my email in here if anyone wants to follow up with me about this offline. I'm happy to. And if you have questions that you want to ask GISCI directly, you're welcome to email them also at info@gisci.org. Right. Okay. So let's have at it.
Yeah. So the first one, most recent one was, can they have access to a copy of the slideshow with the breakdown of the exam content?
Yeah, that's a great question. I don't think that I'm able to provide the slides directly, but I have the exact content is on the website. There's actually a multiple like PDFs that have all that content in it, and I can pull it down and then maybe share it if folks are interested that have registered. Right. So everything that I showed here is comes directly from documents that are on the GISCI website.
When I post this recording to YouTube, we can include all those links
Okay.
as well in the description.
Great.
And then you talked a little bit about preparing for the exam, but maybe do you have maybe some tips in the best way to study and prepare?
Yeah, that's a great point. Oh, yeah, I said, oh, get ready and prepare, right? So what does that mean? Yeah, so I think people take different perspectives. So my suggestion is that the best thing to do is to assess yourself about the criteria, the content that is tested on the exam. So, for example, I'll just go back here and maybe I skipped over this and people are interested in it. My apologies. So, for example, geospatial data fundamentals has the most questions on the exam, right? So this is broken up. So these are the percent of questions. And you can look at that and you can ask yourself questions, do you know stuff about that, right? So if you never heard anything about data validation, uncertainty, data accuracy, data quality control, maybe you heard about it, but what does that mean in detail, right? You probably want to find out more about it. So I think the GISCI line has always been that, oh, you can go to GIS books and look at them, right? Or if you find content online, there's plenty of online content about these different topics. Yeah, so I would self-assess myself and then find the areas that I'm probably weakest in, and then try to find out more about that, right? So it's easy for me to say, the questions are multiple choice. I would also say tell you that, right? So they're multiple choice, and so you can also do the process of elimination, right? So you have which of these 4 answers is correct. So it's not like you're at complete mercy of fill in the blank or something. But looking at that detail is important, and I would also say that. Knowing sort of the technical aspects of GIS in the sense of where the field is moving. So when I say GIS, you may say to yourself, oh, you're talking about like desktop ArcGIS, right? And yes, primarily, but you got to look at where the field is heading towards, and web GIS is an important component of GIS and where things are headed. So you want to think about the big picture of all the technologies that are related.
Cool.
I was hoping maybe we could get a show of hands if people have taken the test already who are on this call. If you could use the reaction button to raise your hand. Or thumbs up or anything. It doesn't look like anyone has taken it yet. I actually took it in 2019, and yes, it was a hard test. Fortunately, I may pass the first time, but those practice test questions online were really important. And somebody asked about where it was taken also.
Yeah.
And it is in a testing center. Mine was in the back of like one of those tax places. So
Yeah, I think there's like a third party company that sets it up. It's used for a lot of like different certifications in different professions. I think it's PSI, and Melissa, you could probably say that you made an appointment and then you show up and then somebody's looking over your shoulder. Well, not the whole time, but
it is on a computer in those testing centers, and
right.
you're supposed to get a preliminary score when you leave. And then you get your official score a few weeks later.
Yeah, I see Hassan has another question about people not from the US and how the certificates help them in their career. That's a great question. So there's increasing number of GIS professionals taking the exam like all around the world, right? So and we've been talking about this in the GISCI outreach committee that it would be great to have someone share their story about the details of what had happened in their the value of taking the exam and what it did for their career. But I can't think of any stories off the top of my head of people's personal processes, but I am aware that so if let's say you're from somewhere else and then you move to the US, you have greater it's a credential that everyone can understand, right? So it's like I don't have to go and like figure out what people did at this university in another country, right? You have you're on even playing field with others, and I would say that. On the GISCI outreach committee, this is actually a great question that I'll bring to the folks there. Several people on this committee are people of international origin, and I think that's a great question. And personally, I think it would be helpful for the reasons I stated. So, thanks for that thoughtful question. Really appreciate it. Okay, so a question about local testing center, or do we all meet at one place? Yes. So Melissa, I don't know where you took yours. I guess it was probably at some
it was
H&R
like
block.
H&R block in the back. I was the only one taking the test at the time. You have to make an appointment. There was only 6 computers there, so and the other people who were there were taking other tests, like you mentioned. So it's
right.
Yeah, it's not a big like SAT type situation.
Oh yeah, like olden times, right? When
right.
Yeah, so
do they even still do that for the SATs? I don't know.
Right. I don't think so. But yeah. So I think Chalissa is saying that Shalissa that it's not a big room of people, right? People take it like on demand, and there may be other people that are taking it that are GIS people, but it's sort of funny, right? So actually, I took the UAS exam also, which is for like drone pilots, and it's a similar type of process, and the same company actually makes the appointments for you to go and take the test online. So. I don't know if anyone else wants to share their experiences. Feel free. But I highly recommend it. It sounds like it's difficult, but with preparation, I think it can help you in your career, particularly if you're like in a spot where you are feeling competent and confident in what you're doing, and you want to take the next step. Sometimes I think that's helpful. People have also used the argument that people, I'm going to go in my, why get a GISP spiel that I didn't include before. Another thing is when you articulate that you need to get a raise or you need to increase your salary for performance-based reasons, this professional certification is also something that that goes along with that. I've also have heard of companies that will defray the cost. So I don't know, Melissa, if you had that.
I'm in state government, so I did not have that option, but that seems like something that might be available for people in the private sector.
Yeah. Now that I think about it,
Yeah.
this might be why so many people in
Yeah.
at ACOM and Wolpert are getting it, right? So someone else is paying for it.
I'm also curious for people on the line, like what other GISP related content you'd be interested in having. Like I'm in the process of getting my GISP, so this was very interesting for me, and I know it's a very intimidating process. So if you could send us an email at the professional development email, we'll pop it. I don't have it handy. Leticia, do you have it? Or you can pop it in the chat about the content that might help you on that process. We'd love to hear about it. And Chris mentioned this in passing in his presentation, but being part of the New York State GIS Association and volunteering on a committee counts, and not just attending these things. So.
Yeah, and in my my last thought about this is that if anyone wants to chat about it, I feel like connecting with another person about this whole process, like Melissa was saying, it could be kind of intimidating, right? So if you can, they often GISCI, one of the things they say is you should form a study group with other people, right? And the idea behind it is really to like share and give mutual support, and also to like keep up the motivation to study, right? So after you work all day, then you want to go and study again, But the other thing about the studying, I would say, I guess I should wrap it up here. But one thing I would say about the studying is that you can do it in different ways, and you can kind of like orderly study a little bit over time, or you can like take a day off from work and just like do all this. If you're able to do that, just like gorge. You don't want to binge and purge, but you kind of get the idea of like the different methods that people use. And yeah, so if anyone wants to talk more about it, feel free to email me or get in contact through the Professional Development Committee.
If there's no last minute questions, we will end this presentation here. Thank you so much, Chris, for doing this. It was very informative, and I hope that, we continue providing all of you attendees with more information on all of these things. So.
All right, thanks everybody for coming, and I appreciate your participation, and feel free to join us at the association if you haven't done so already.